Welcome to a new episode of ROL Radio. On this episode, we have second degree black belt under Claudio Franca, Nathan Mendelsohn. Along with Nathan's long list of achievements, he is a Copa Podio Champion, AJP Tour Tokyo Grand Slam Champion, and an IBJJF Europeans black belt bronze medalist. Nathan has been living the jiu-jitsu lifestyle everyone dreams of. Listen as he talks about traveling from Santa Cruz to Brazil to train, having amazing Brazilian black belts stay at his childhood home, surfing some of the choicest spots in California, and now his hip-hop career. But personal struggles were holding him back, and he needed to change his lifestyle before everything fell apart. Nathan opens up about these struggles and what he did to overcome them and find a new balance in his life. Here's ROL Radio with No G and a Gi, Nathan Mendelsohn.
Welcome to ROL Radio.
And we are live. Gary, how are you?
I'm great. I'm super excited about today. How you doing?
I'm stoked. And it seems like every week it gets better and better and better. I don't know how we're going to top this. This is Nate. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good, man. Doing good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, great to talk to you. First of all, I'm hearing that you guys are open in California.
We're open here for now anyway.
I am so jealous. Like we are going through jiu-jitsu withdrawal here in Illinois. And you guys are open. How is that going?
It's going good so far. We just opened. This is our first full week open. We opened last Friday, so we're getting used to it. You know, we had a lot of our students cancel obviously during the time when we were closed. So most of the ones that are still signed up have started coming back, and we've had some pretty good sized adult classes. We extended our mat space during the time that we were closed so we can fit a few more people on the mat while still maintaining the social distancing and stuff. And but you know, it's going to be tough times ahead still for a while, you know, before people that are basically the people that aren't that worried about it have come back to train, but people that are really worried about it still aren't coming back. There's still some people that are paying their memberships, but they're still worried about it, so they haven't come back yet. We had a few people actually, new students sign up, so we were kind of surprised by that. But hopefully that keeps going, and hopefully there's no huge second wave that makes us have to close down again. And you know, that's what I'm really afraid about. We really don't want to have to be closed another 2 months and stuff. So hopefully we just keep going and slowly build ourselves back up again. It's kind of a bummer because before all this happened, it seemed like our academy, but everyone around too was doing really good. We're having new students signing up. We're having like 6 new students a week, and you know, classes with 40 people in it, and everything was just going really good. And then this had to come through and kind of, you know, put a wrench in everybody's plans. But hopefully we'll be just, you know, starting from here, but just steadily building up again.
Going back up. Yeah, I think, I don't remember the number right before we closed, but there was a ridiculous number of people on the mat. It was the most we've ever had.
Yeah.
I was just talking about this.
That was?
Yeah, I was just talking to somebody about this yesterday, and yeah, it was over 60 people on the mat, and
wow.
I don't think we're gonna see this anytime soon.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, right? It's no matter how we slice it, jiu-jitsu is the contact, right? So this whole social distancing kind of ruins the concept of. Hey, Nate, serious question: do you know touchless jiu-jitsu?
We all made fun of those guys in the past, but now maybe they were onto something.
maybe. Hey, it could be a gold mine right there, right?
Yeah, seriously. Even like with the we'll get into the G and the Gi later, but I make fun of a little bit in that the teaching jiu-jitsu online type thing, and you know, now they're the guys that are doing well, the online jiu-jitsu stuff. I never thought I'd teach jiu-jitsu online, but we were doing while we were closed. We had the Zoom classes going, but it's not the same thing. You know, it's like, I'm always telling people, it's like trying to surf when there's no waves. You know, you can't get in the water, but you're going to try to surf anyway. It's like, it's not going to be the same no matter what you do, you know?
Well, but the good news is that you guys are opening. The good news is that, you know, I think this is the first stepping stone towards whatever future holds. So no matter how we slice this, this is better than us being locked down for another 3 months, right? So
most definitely.
For those of you who don't know you, tell us a little bit more about what you teach, how you teach, and we kind of know the story, but listeners don't. So what do you specialize in? What classes do you teach? How are you involved in the academy?
So now I'm teaching the majority of the academies at the majority of the classes at the Santa Cruz Academy, and I teach one night a week in San Jose. We have three main academies that are Claudio Franca, where Claudio is a part owner in the academies, and we have a few more that are part of our Coalition 95 association. But I teach most of the classes at the Santa Cruz Academy, and I teach one night in San Jose. I teach all the kids in Santa Cruz and most of the adults. So my specialty is more the sport side of jiu-jitsu, the competition side. Claudio is also a competitor, so he has that too, from back in the day, but he's got all the self-defense side of stuff, all the knife defense and everything. So that's one of the kind of the cool things about our academy is we really have both sides of the spectrum. Most academies are kind of either an old school professor that's really into the self-defense, or they've got the new school guy that does a lot of the competition. So it's kind of cool that our academy, we've got both, but I'm more definitely the competition side. I like to teach everybody the more advanced type jiu-jitsu and stuff, and then they get the real basic foundation with Claudio.
That's cool. And you mentioned you teach kids as well.
I do, yeah.
How's that going?
It's good. I started teaching kids when I started helping with the kids class when I was 15. And then I started taking over being like the main kids instructor when I was like 17 or 18. And then I just been doing that ever since. So I've been teaching munchkins forever.
The $1 million question, who's more difficult, adults or kids?
Oh, by far kids, for sure. Definitely.
That's
adults.
Not what you were going to say.
Really?
No, I thought you were going to say adults for sure. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
No.
Well,
no.
Gary teaches kids. That's why I asked that, because throwing him right under the bus.
Right. Well, I know what it's like for
I
me.
always say he got the easy job, but you just ruined it, man. Come on.
No, kids are difficult because kids, you get a mixed bag of kids. Some of them, it's really cool. And lately, before this whole thing happened, we had like a really good group of kids that have been training with me for a long time that were really into it, and then that kind of snowballs. So kids that aren't into it, they either get into it or they don't stick around. But when you have a class full of kids where half of them are into it, half of them are only there because their parents are making them be there, then it's difficult. And I don't have I have a lot of patience for kids, but I don't pander to the kids that aren't paying attention. I'm like, if you don't want to pay attention, then sit in the corner and twiddle your thumbs. There's kids here that want to do it. And then it's really fun when you got a group of kids that are really into training. But when you're trying to wrangle them, it's like trying to corral cats or something is difficult.
About a year into it for me, I was struggling with the ones that weren't into it. What am I doing wrong? I was always thinking, it's me. What am I doing wrong? And I went to an affiliate in the city and talked to their head kids program instructor. And he was just like, work with the ones that get it. Mm-hmm. Make sure the other ones are paying attention because their parents are paying for it. Right. And also make sure the other ones are having fun, because at least if they're having fun, they're going to keep coming back.
Right.
And then at some point, maybe it'll click. Right. Mm-hmm. And then they'll be in that group with all the other kids that are really into jiu-jitsu. So.
Yeah. If you get caught trying to make that one kid, there's always one kid in your class that just kind of wants your attention, and the more attention you give to him, the more he's just going to not do what you're trying to get him to do, so that you keep paying attention to him. And if you end up paying too much attention to that kid, then it's also not fair, because then he gets 95% of the attention during class, and he's the one kid that's not into it, so yeah. I caught myself doing that a lot. So instead of trying to make the whole class do well, I kind of award the kids that are paying more attention, because everybody's paying the same amount, right? So it's not fair to ignore the kid that's paying a lot of attention and pay all the attention to the kid that's messing around, So I make sure everybody's got the opportunity to have a good class, but I definitely try to give more energy into the kids that are actually deserving it, And then the balance of fun in jiu-jitsu is really important too. So I try to do at least a couple games each class, but I've also found that the kids enjoy sparring a lot, because I was a kid and I started as a kid, and I remember that was what I liked the most, was the sparring, So I do only one move per class for the kids, because I figure that they can't understand like 10 different moves in one class, so I teach them one move, get them to do it a lot of times, and then I do a lot of positional sparring and a lot of sparring, because in that way it's something that they're looking forward to coming to class. They like to do that, and also it's not just making them do tag or soccer that has nothing to do with jiu-jitsu either. They're having fun, but they're also doing the jiu-jitsu, so that's what I try to focus on with the kids.
That sounds like it's working. We do a lot of similar stuff here too, so that's awesome. Thank you.
Awesome.
So you said you started teaching when you were 15?
Yeah.
15. Oh.
Is that
Talk
about the
about
same
that.
time you went to started going down to Brazil?
I went to Brazil the first time when I was 17.
Okay,
Yeah,
so a little later.
around the same time. Yeah.
How many trips have you made up to this point?
I just went back in December, so that was my 8th time.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. What?
Yeah. I
You
love
just
Brazil.
took it to
man.
the next level, man. 8 times, and I didn't get an invite. What's wrong with this picture here?
We'll go next time, bro. We'll go next time.
All right, talk about. So, I mean, 8 times in Brazil over a significant period of time. I'm sure things have changed. Talk about your first trip. How did it go? Why did you go first time at 17? I mean, what were you thinking?
Yeah, there used to be a lot of people from the gym that would go, and they always were talking about how cool it was down in Brazil. And back then it was different. Nowadays we're kind of spoiled here in the U.S. We have a lot of jiu-jitsu. There's a lot of academies. Most of the best guys live here, like especially in California and New York and stuff. I don't know how it is in Illinois, but I'm sure there's a lot of top guys out there too. But a lot of the best of the best guys live in the US now. So and there's just, the sport is older now. It used to be like, if we had like a purple belt on the mat, we thought that was amazing. We were like, wow, this guy's been training for so long. It was the vast majority of practitioners were white and blue. If you had a brown belt on the mat, he was generally teaching the class. Nowadays when I'm teaching, I've got 4 or 5 black belts just doing the class. This is pre-corona, right? We have like 4 or 5 black belts doing the class, another 5 or 6 brown belts, 10 purple belts, but it didn't used to be that way, and that's how it was in Brazil. So I used to feel like I had to go to Brazil every year just to maintain my level, because the level was so much higher. I used to go every year, and then after a while it became a little bit less, like I'm saying, less essential to maintain your level to go to Brazil. You used to only have like my masters tournament, the US Open and the Pan Americans. Those were like the only 2 really big tournaments in the US. Now there's a tournament. I mean, again, pre-corona, there was a tournament every week almost in the US. All the biggest tournaments are here. All the best guys are here. You've got, you could go down to San Diego and train with the best guys in the world in these crazy mats with a ton of killers and stuff. So after a while I stopped going every year because it wasn't as essential. But back in the day, I felt like I had to be down there to be competing with the guys and training with the guys that were really good. And still, I think the level's definitely still higher there, and it's still definitely worth going down there, on top of the fact that it's amazing. Like, I mean, that's my favorite place to ever go. I've been to quite a few places, but Brazil's got, the best parties and beaches and training and everything. So for a jiu-jitsu guy, it's just like paradise. So it's worth going. But I want to get back to doing the annual trip again, but I definitely used to be like, I have to go every year to maintain my level,
Talk about the first trip. Go back in time a little bit. 17 years old.
Yeah.
Go to Brazil by yourself, or is this an organized trip, or how is this going down?
Well, I used to go. There was one of our black belts, Paul Schreiner. He teaches at Marcelo Garcia's academy now. He's Marcelo's like main instructor guy. He went from white to black belt with our team, Claudio Franca, and then he changed over there and teaches with Marcelo now. He was a brown belt at the time, and he used to go to Brazil all the time, and he spoke like perfect Portuguese and stuff, and he was living down there in Rio at the time. So I went down and stayed with him for a month the first time, and another guy from our team was down there at the same time too. A couple other guys came down and met us down there. So that trip was really cool, but I ended up not learning quite as much like Portuguese, or being quite as immersed in like the culture, because I was kind of staying with Paul and hanging out with my American friends, and so it was like an American gringo trip in Brazil. And then between the first time and the second time I went, Teodoro Canal from GF Team, he came and stayed at my house when we were doing the US Open. He came and reffed at the US Open and competed, and I think he taught for like a couple weeks at our academy, and he was staying at my house. And then the next time I went down there, he's like, oh, stay with me. So then I stayed with him and his family, and like he didn't speak very much English. His family didn't speak any English, and then that was back before it was GF team. It was UGF, the University of Gamafilio, and Rodolfo was like a brown belt. This was like the year that he won after I met him down there, he went on to win the World Pro and became the black belt hunter and everything. And then GF team was created, and they started blowing up like right after that and became really well known. But so I was just with all the Brazilians. None of them spoke any English. I think the only other gringo was Hillary Williams. She's like a really good black belt world champion, and she was down there. And so I was talking to her a little bit, but that was the first time I was like really immersed in the like Brazilian culture. And then I would stay with him every time I would go down there, and I'd stay with my buddy Marcus Antalante from Soul Fighters. And that's when I really started learning Portuguese and getting more of like the Brazilian experience. That first trip was really fun, but it was more like kind of from the outside looking in,
First time on vacation.
Yeah.
It had to be quite an experience. I mean, 17 years old, you go to Brazil, or even, a year later, you go to Brazil. Not only you're surrounded by black belts, you're surrounded by people who speak Portuguese in this beautiful country, and you're doing what you love. So at that point you are in jiu-jitsu for several years, right? This is 17, you are teaching at 15. So I assume there's several years of experience you already have.
Yeah.
Any good stories?
Yeah.
I was going there.
I started training when I was 10. So yeah, I'd already been training for like 7 years by then. And I hurt my lower back. I had like a herniated disc that I hurt. I went there the first time. I actually went in 2007, the first time, because I wanted to compete the world championships. And so I got my ticket to go and everything, and I was all ready to go down there to compete. And then I hurt my back first, so I wasn't even quite back to training by then. But I was like, oh, I'm going to go anyway because it'll just be fun just to go. And then that ended up being the first year that the IBJJF moved the worlds from Brazil to the U.S. Mm-hmm. So then I was like, oh shit, well, I'm going down here to compete, and then the tournament's not even here. But it ended up being better because I think they moved it back that year. It was the first time that it was in like August or something like that. So then it ended up working out perfect because I went down there. That gave me a little more time to heal my back, and then I came back and the tournament was here in the US. So I was actually able to compete anyway. But it was pretty cool.
What belt are you at then?
I was a blue belt, juvenile.
Blue belt.
Yeah. And that first time I trained with Gordo, because that's who Paul was training with down there. And
old school.
Yeah. He had just broken off of Gracie Baja and created his own little academy. So we stayed for anybody that's familiar with Rio, there's Baja is kind of a little bit farther away from people usually think of like Ipanema and Copacabana. That's the Zona Sul. That's where most of the tourism is and stuff. And Baja's a little bit more separated. It's kind of a slower pace, and it's really nice to visit. Actually, it's a little bit less dangerous and stuff. And we stayed at this place at the streets called Olegario Maciel. And that's where the original Gracie Baja Academy is. And then there's like a big church. It's like kind of an iconic church at the top. We were staying in this apartment that was right across from the church. And then Gordo had just broken off of Gracie Baja and opened his own little academy that was like right across this little river from where we were at. So we were going there to train, and he had just opened it like that month or something. So the only people training there was like Rafael dos Anjos, Gordo, Braga Neto, Celcinho, so just like all world champions. And I was like the only blue belt like gringo. There's one other blue belt gringo from our team too. So it was just like amazing. I was like, whoa, it was almost like a private training just with these like world champion guys. So it was a pretty cool experience. Yeah.
That's crazy.
What I like a lot about this story, or your story, is you decided to learn Portuguese. Which we'll talk a little bit more when we get into hip hop as well. But how hard was that? Was it? I mean, because you're totally fluent now. I've seen you speak it, and it's pretty incredible. Was it just so you could train, or was it? Why did you want to learn it?
Well, jiu-jitsu's kind of been my thing ever since I was really young. So I was always hanging out with Brazilians all the time. So I mean, those first few years that I would go down there, like I said, the first time I went, I was with more gringos, so it wasn't as difficult. I was around people that were speaking English all the time. But Paul, he speaks like perfect Portuguese. He and I thought that was like the coolest thing. Like people would be like, oh, we thought you were Brazilian. We didn't even realize you were American, And I was like, dude, that's the coolest thing. And then like I was just so lost, and it seems like such a huge, I tried to learn Spanish in high school and stuff and wasn't able to very well. And I was like, dude, I'm never going to be able to learn this language. This is way too crazy. Like, so I thought it was so cool that he spoke it so well. And then I started going down and staying with the Brazilian families. And so we would be like, I had no idea what was happening. Like I'd be at the training, and then we'd leave the house in the morning and we go train, and then we go do this and do that. I'm like, I don't even know where I'm going. I don't know when I'm coming home. Like, and then we go stay somewhere else. Like all of a sudden we're traveling to another town to compete. We went one time from Rio, drove to Sao Paulo to compete. And like, I'm like, all right, like, I don't know what's happening, but let's go
along for the ride.
Like,
it sounds to me like a jiu-jitsu dream. I don't know what you're complaining about.
No, it was cool. But it's kind of like, I don't know if you guys have probably been in a similar situation somewhere where you don't know what's happening or what anybody's saying, and like they're just leaving you out of the conversation all the time, and you're just like, so those first few trips, they were like really fun. But it was a little bit where like by the end of the trip I was ready to go home, because I'm like, I'm ready to understand what people are saying around me, like a little bit, and then so that was why I really was like, dude, I want to be able to like participate in the training and the everything, talk to people at training and be a part of the conversation. So that's why I wanted to start learning. And then during that time I had Brazilians living at my house, like from GF team or from Rodolfo came and stayed at like a month in my house, and different guys would come and stay. And so during that time where I was really going every year, I also had, during the rest of the time, I'd go for like a month or two, and then the other 10 or 11 months there was some Brazilian living at my house, black belt, that I was training with. And so I was also learning Portuguese from them the rest of the time. So I just kind of was lucky enough to be immersed in it enough and be around it so much that I could just start picking it up little by little. I never took any classes. I just picked it up just through speaking. And then eventually, like now I've got a group of really close Brazilian friends that I talk with all the time. So I'm constantly speaking Portuguese and just learning it more and more and more all the time. So it just kind of was like a natural evolution.
That's pretty sweet. I want you to talk about, people coming to your house, and it seemed to me like it was a foreign exchange program that your parents, right, helped you out with. That to me is just incredible. For them to open up their home, right? Because this is still when you're at home, and for them to let these guys come up and hang and live with you guys is really something special.
Yeah. My parents are the best. I mean, they've always supported me. I don't know why, like they decided from the beginning of, they always encouraged me to do like the jiu-jitsu thing, when you can turn jiu-jitsu into a high paying career if you're smart about it and you have a good academy and you have multiple streams of revenue through different things. I'm sure that's what you guys are going, you guys know more than anybody, but it's not like, most parents want their kids to become a doctor or a lawyer or something like that. And my mom works at a tech company and stuff, but they always really encouraged me to go with the jiu-jitsu, so that was really cool. Like even my Brazilian friends are like, man, that's crazy. Like, most parents aren't like that. And even like, my parents are really welcoming, which the Brazilians are always kind of surprised by, because generally, like when you go to Brazil, everybody wants you to stay at their house. They all want you to come over for a barbecue. They all want you to meet their parents and their aunts and their grandma, and they're all super like that. But then they come to the States and Americans aren't that way, in general.
It's different culture, right? I mean,
it is
just not that we don't want to, it's just different. It's built different. We grow up differently, right?
Right. Exactly. So my parents are kind of more that way. My dad was always that way. We have like a little separate room on the property that's separate from the house, and he would always have his friends come and stay there. They'd always be, we live in Santa Cruz, which is a nice kind of tourist destination. So his friends would always come and stay there. And so there's always somebody in the shack, we call it, staying out there for a week or two or whatever. So then when this really getting into jiu-jitsu thing started happening, he was like, man, it'd be super cool if like a Brazilian black belt wanted to come and stay here for a while, and then he could teach you, and everything. And he was all excited. So then,
wait. Whose idea was this? Yours or your parents?
This is more my parents' idea.
Really?
Yeah.
We need to get your parents on the show.
Yeah, you should. You should. My dad just got his black belt actually, and
really,
that's incredible.
Wow. Yeah. Well, we need to get your dad on here. That's so awesome.
Yeah, we'll get him on for the next episode. Yeah, that was a cool story too. He used to be really overweight, and he watched me train for almost 10 years. And everybody would be like, Rod, come train. He would watch every class. He used to film training so I could watch my training afterward and stuff. And everybody would be like, you got to try sometime. And he'd be like, no, I'm never going to do it. I'm never going to do it. And then eventually I just started bugging him, nagging him as I got older. I was like, you're going to start training. You're going to start training. And he was like, no. And eventually I bugged him enough that he started. And then he never stopped after that. He went from like 230 to 180, and then he just kept training, and he eventually got his black belt, and he's like 69 now, 68, 69. So yeah, I was super proud of him.
What an amazing story.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
That's so cool. All right, so you have these exchange black belts coming in and out of your house. You're visiting Brazil, all of this, thanks to your parents. What an amazing situation, and where all of this is going. I mean, are you at this point, are you really anticipating to make a living on jiu-jitsu, or this is just a hobby? Because at that point we were what, 19, 20? I mean, where are you at age-wise?
Yeah, so this all started around that same time. I went to Brazil the first time when I was 17. Then during that year, Teodoro came and stayed at my house, and then I went down and stayed at his house. And then when I came back, then during the same time, Claudio was he does tournaments too. So he started making he had a couple tournaments, but now he was really starting to turn it up. He's doing what's called the BJJ Tour now. So he does the US Open, the All-Star, the American Cup, and then he does BJJ Tour events in different states. They're really, really well-run tournaments. They're like the IBJJF. Claudio actually, he's kind of helped IBJJF get their footing in the US. He kind of gave them he was a tournament promoter in Brazil. So he kind of really helped them get their bearings on how to run tournaments in the US and everything. He's like really professional with it and stuff. And so he was putting a lot of energy into that. So he started wanting he was open to the idea of having Brazilian black belts teaching a lot of his classes here during that same time, because he was focusing so much on the tournaments and stuff. So it ended up working out well. My dad was like, oh, we'll have the guys come and stay at our house, and then you can learn from them and everything. So that was around like when I was 17, 18, 19. And that was when I really started deciding that jiu-jitsu was going to be like my main thing. When I was about 14, I really started getting into it, and I was into jiu-jitsu and water polo. I played water polo in high school, and I was really into both of those. And, my parents are kind of like, oh, what are you going to do? You might be able to get a scholarship for water polo and go to college and do that whole thing. And then, yeah, around like 16, 17, that was where I started going to Brazil. And then that's when the kind of water polo started falling to the side. I remember the first time I went to the Pan Ams when I was 15 and fought as a juvenile. My first fight, I fought against a student from Hickson Gracie, and Hickson was coaching his student against me, and he was inside I just seen Choke like a couple years before, and Hickson was like my idol, and he was like inside the fences on the edge of the mat, like coaching the student, and I lost, but he didn't finish me. And then I went up to him and like shook his hand afterward, and I was like, this is so cool. And that was when I just really got bit by the bug, and I was like, yeah, jiu-jitsu is going to be my thing.
That's cool. So go ahead, Gary.
Well, I was going to say then at that point, I mean, in your early 20s, you're here, you're competing, you're winning a lot, right? And I've never competed. I didn't start till I was older, and I know it doesn't look it, but I'm close to 50 here, and to be competing on that level, that top level, that's just got to be amazing. And I are you aware at that point of what you're doing, who you're facing, and just in our world, how big it really is?
Yeah, I mean, when I was young, I already started having the dream of like being the guy, I got up on the podium at the Pans as a purple belt. And then, when I was brown, I was already fighting a lot of the guys. I was doing fights. I fought Kron Gracie when I was brown and he was black. And so I was already real aware of it by then. I was going down to Brazil and winning tournaments down there and doing the whole thing. And, so I already had it in my head that I wanted to be like the big guy. And I was a fan of jiu-jitsu too, so like I got my black belt when I was 22, turning 23. So my first and I was also, like I said, I was a big fan, so I would go to like all the Pans and the Worlds, and ever since I was 15, I started going to the Pans. So I was watching Thiago Alves was one of my guys I really was a huge fan of, and Andre Galvão back when Andre Galvão was like a middleweight. And watching all the old videos too of Jacare and all that. That was really one of the things that made me like really into jiu-jitsu, because I used to do karate and taekwondo and the whole thing. So I was always doing martial arts and competing ever since I was a kid. And when I started in jiu-jitsu, it was like fun because I would do little tournaments and stuff, and it was like training at the academy. But when I started seeing videos of like the tournaments in Brazil and the guys are like beating the drums, and then everybody's like a team, they had like Aliança and Gracie Baja, and then, you know, and it was Tererê Tellus at the time back in the day, and the guys were all excited, and the, you know, it was like a pro sport event. Like I was like, whoa, this is cool. Like I didn't realize that it was so like such a big thing, you know. And then I would go to the Pans and I was like, whoa, this is like, you know, these guys are like pro athletes and there's like fans and everything. And that's when I was really like, dude, this is really cool, you know. And then going to Brazil and seeing that whole thing. So I was definitely really aware of like, I want to be like this, like a pro jiu-jitsu guy, you know. And then my first fight at Worlds as a black belt, I fought against Michael Longi, who is a friend of mine now. I've gone down to, really good friends with Tarsis Humphreys. So I went down and trained with Aliança the last couple of times I've been in Brazil. So I've trained with him a bunch since then and stuff, but I was a fan of him at the time. And then I fought him as my first match in the Worlds, and I only lost by one advantage. And like they posted it in Gracie Mag as like one of the best fights of the tournament and stuff. And I was like, whoa, this is so cool. So yeah, I've been like definitely into it ever since.
Yeah. You know what's interesting about everything that you're saying right now, that I feel like, you know, students today are so much more spoiled. Just from a perspective of having access to all these things, you know, like when we take it back 10, 15, 20 years ago, when we were starting, you know, none of this existed. Like if you wanted to see Pan Ams, you had to go to Pan Ams.
Yeah.
As accessible as it is today. Matter of fact, if you're talking about 20 years ago, if you want to do Worlds or Sea Worlds, you had to fly out to Brazil. That's the only thing. Or you could open your whatever jiu-jitsu magazine and, you know, flip the pictures 4 months later, right? I mean, that were the options, right?
Or try to get the VHS or the DVD.
Do you remember those? Like the VHS, the bootlegged VHS tapes that were floating all around. Oh my God.
Totally.
Man.
And technique and stuff wasn't so readily available either. I remember getting like the Cobrinha DVDs and stuff, and the old VHS tapes of technique and stuff. It's like nowadays there's so much stuff out there. You can just get on YouTube and see the best of the best guys showing their best moves and stuff. It was like, you know, back in the day, like even before it was really like you would get a lot of DVDs and stuff. That was the DVDs and everything was kind of the beginning of the technique starting to become more
mainstreaming
of everyone. Yeah. Whereas back in the day, it was like everybody was kind of really protective of their technique, you know, like the Tererê Tellus guys had their game, and the Aliança guys had their game, and the Gracie Baja guys had their game, and Novo União, and you would only really see it at the tournament when you're fighting the guys, you know, and then you might have to try to film it so that you could study it later. But it was like back then it was like a real thing. Like, don't show your technique. Like people would get pissed if you, like, the master showed his technique and then you went to another gym and showed that technique. Like people would be like, what are you doing? You know, nowadays that's like a dead thing because everybody's just showing everything all the time, you know.
Well, it's not only that, but back then there was a lot of emphasis of training in the small groups or training within your academy, within your camp. You know, like nobody goes outside, nobody comes inside, you know, and
totally.
Today, not only the data is so accessible, but also there was cross training, which is for most part welcome, right?
Yeah.
You know, and obviously there are exceptions in the tournament scenarios and so on, but the cross training is by far more accessible than it was 10 or 20 years ago.
Most definitely.
In fact, all these rivalries, because there was a part of the cool stuff, the old school jiu-jitsu, right?
Yeah.
The Gracie Bot, don't talk to these guys, and, you know, Alliance, and they all meet at Worlds, and all problems get resolved, and there's one match.
Yeah.
Isn't it? I mean,
yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, you know, I like when they had all the teams would do their chants at Worlds and stuff. That was always really cool. And, you know, it's like, I mean, we're an old school traditional type gym. So there's definitely like, we have a certain thing where we want our students to come up believing in lineage and hierarchy and respect to the master and loyalty. And we're trying to build black belts that are going to be a part of our team, that are going to want to continue to make our team stronger and everything. But at the same time, you know, I train at other teams all the time, and we accept people from other teams to come and train. So we're keeping some of the old school thing, but not like, oh, you're not allowed to train here or don't train anywhere else, you know?
Yeah, we had an anniversary party here. This was 2 years ago. and one of our black belts, as people were talking after we had rolled and everything, he came out and he was like, you guys have no idea how lucky you are. Because I think we had 5 guest black belts here that day.
That's
And
awesome.
he was like, when I started 12 years ago, this never would have happened.
Right.
You guys just learned from X amount of black belts. They're showing you stuff that they, when I started, wouldn't be allowed to show me.
Right.
And here you go, and it was amazing. It was amazing. They have all those guys, all that knowledge on the mat for us. It was really something special. So
That's
I think
awesome.
it's great now that it's opened up so much.
But then there's also like this other side of it too, where, I think it's kind of cool when not everybody, like, you get these kind of magnet teams, right? And it's definitely not the fault of the teams, nor do I judge the people that do it, but it's like, you get these kind of talented guys, like even I was like kind of me, I stick with my team and my master. A lot of guys in my position would have gone to a Gracie Baja or an Alianza or an Atos, and you wonder, like, how do these guys make so many good champions? Well, the majority of them they're a magnet, so some other instructor made this guy a really good blue belt or purple belt or brown belt or even black belt, but he's like right there, like getting toward the edge of the breaking through, and then he goes to a Galvão's team so that Galvão can make him a world champion, So that to me it loses a little bit of the coolness of it. It'd be like a little more cool to me if there was more teams and people were like with their master that they came up with from white to black, and then they ended up fighting with each other. You'd see a lot less people closing out. You wonder why, how come there's so many closeouts? It's because the guy from X team and Y team, both from 2 different corners of the globe, both moved to San Diego to get together with Z team, and now they're teammates. So instead of them fighting in the end of the worlds, now they're closing it out, So I wonder if that'll eventually implode to some level where, like, now there's only one team, and then competitive jiu-jitsu is just going to end because all the guys are on the same team. We're going to have closeouts from like the quarterfinals all the way up. Like, it's like kind of funny, but I mean,
but that's part of the evolution of jiu-jitsu, right? I mean,
yeah,
look at it just in past 2 decades, and that's as far as I look, because that's what I started. But things have changed so much that it's actually quite ridiculous. I don't know if any other sports evolve so much, not only from technique perspective, but from a teaching style and, competition and just culture wise and so on. Right. I mean,
totally.
That's part of the evolution. That's what makes it cool. Right.
Yeah. And also people never get along long enough for it to really happen that, because, eventually Atos is going to get so big that even like, Keenan starts his own team, and then eventually they break off into another team. Like, Alianza is responsible for like most of the teams out there. Checkmat came from Alianza, and Braza and Atos all are, extensions of Alianza. And so we'll never have that one big conglomerate team. But I just think it's funny, like when things like kind of what happened with Leandro and like Buchecha is kind of weird, where it's like, they believe in the cross training thing, so you always see pictures of Leandro and Buchecha training, and then, now Herbert's training with them a lot, and you always see Brigitte training with them and Rodolfo and stuff. But then you get the 2 best guys where, Leandro and Buchecha, and they're not really on the same team, but they're just really good friends and they train all the time. So now we don't have a final at Worlds because they're just friends with each other and train all the time. It's like, okay, well, if you guys are on the same team, like I understand that because you guys train all the time. You guys are representing the same banner. Like it's hard for you to get to the final of the Worlds and then fight each other because, your training is going to be different. But if you guys aren't even deciding to be under the same banner, you're not the same team, but you get to the final of Worlds and now you're not going to fight each other. Like, everybody thought that was super cool when like Buchecha gave Leandro like the final of Worlds, like absolute title and stuff. I'm like, that's cool. But it's kind of the only one in history that has like an asterisk next to it, because it's like, yeah, Leandro won the final of Worlds, but he didn't really, because he was injured and he probably wouldn't have beat Buchecha. So he's got that title, but it wasn't really his, not to talk down on him or anything. Like I've trained with Leandro a lot and he's a super cool guy and everything, but that's just one of those things to me that's kind of weird nowadays, where it's like, that type of a situation existing, that I don't dig that much, I think that's kind of strange.
Well, we'll see how things unfold.
Yeah.
But as we go through your story, everything looks pretty awesome. I don't know. I mean, everything you tell us is like life is all rainbows and unicorns. I mean, you live the dream, the jiu-jitsu dream. Your parents support you. You travel to Brazil. you have Brazilians coming here, you learn jiu-jitsu, then you start teaching and you teach more, and you turn away other opportunities for scholarships and so on. It's all to drive this vehicle of future career towards jiu-jitsu. Everything is awesome. Any obstacles?
Yeah.
What's happening in life?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's lots of obstacles, and you know, it's definitely not that glamorous as it sounds. But I mean, like we were talked about before, one of the things that I ran into that kind of held me back a bit was like drinking and partying and stuff. You know, it's like I think everybody deals with that. You know, as I was coming up through like the belts and stuff, I was always really focused on jiu-jitsu. So then when I kind of started finding like parties and that type of stuff in my 20s, that started being something that was kind of I started to find was holding back my evolution. You know, I felt I'm kind of really intense, so if I'm like dieting, like I'll be eating only really, really well. You know, if I'm training really, really well. If I'm partying though, I was also like partying really hard, you know, so I would have this big like I felt like I was constantly on a roller coaster of like, instead of consistently getting better all the time, like constantly getting, you know, going from one tournament to, you know, 1 year to the next year being a little better to the next year being a little better. And it was always like, get really, really good for pans. And then, you know, I would drop down to lightweight. I used to compete at lightweight, and I would suck all the way out and just for 2 months get super skinny and only train and not do anything. And then in like the day after pans, I would gain like 30 pounds. Literally in like 2 or 3 days, I would gain 25 to 30 pounds, and which obviously can't be healthy for you, you know. And then I would go for a month of just partying, you know, and fit it all in, you know. And then it would be the same for Worlds, you know. And then after Worlds, it would be summer here in Santa Cruz, you know. So then it would be like all summer partying and just eating however I wanted. And then it's like, okay, spend the rest of the year to try to get back to where I was, you know. So that was something that was definitely like a hurdle that I had to get over, you know, where once I stopped. Why do you
think that was happening? Why do you think that roller coaster was so appealing to you?
Because I think it's like, you know, we have this idea of like, I'm going to be the best of the best in the world. Right. So I'm always looking at what could I take out of my what I do normally to make me the very best I possibly could. Right. So for pans, it was like, take everything out, no drinking before pans and Worlds, only eating good food, only training all the time, you know. And you know, we have to be realistic with ourselves, like we're humans too, you know, so you can't maintain that all the time. So then it was like I could swing super far to one side, but then once it was done, I had to swing really far back to the other side, you know. Otherwise I would get depressed and feel like, you know, the only thing that was keeping me going was like knowing that at the end of after this tournament, I was going to get to eat all that shitty food that I want to eat and drink all the beers and do the whole thing, you know. So what I've learned nowadays is to be able to find like a balance is generally better. You know, we have to have waves. You have to be a little bit more focused before a pans in a Worlds. You know, you have to do that little ramp up, but it doesn't help to like try to ramp so much up that afterward you're going to dive way down too. You know, I try to just keep, I try to keep you still have to have waves, but I try to make my waves smaller, you know, like even when I'm not necessarily training for a tournament, I still try to make my life look fairly similar to when I am training for a tournament. You know, I try to still eat well. I try to still train and lift and do my whole thing, you know, so that when it comes time to get back for training again, the difference between what I'm doing and what I want to be doing is small, you know, so now I'm right back to what I want to do. And then, you know, and so that was something that I learned over time, was like, you got to make those waves a little smaller so you can just be constantly on a consistent incline, you know. And so then I had a few different different kind of traumatizing experiences with drinking, where like fights and stuff and different things, that to where I had a couple wake up calls where I was like, okay, I should probably stop drinking because I don't think alcohol mixes very well with me, you know. And then one time on New Year's, it like went overboard, and I won't go into the specifics of everything that happened, but it was like a traumatizing thing where I was like, okay. And I had already thought that plenty of times before. And also leading up to that, I was like depressed for a whole year. where I had this girlfriend that she was cool with me and everything, and she supported me a lot, but we were like really fighting all the time. And with the alcohol and the whole thing, I spent like a whole year almost where I was like depressed. Like I competed in Europe, went to Japan, like went to like El Salvador for a surf trip, did like all these super cool things. And I was just depressed the entire time. And I'm like, can't be right, you know? And then I had this like and I was already thinking like alcohol's a reason for that, you know, like me having this like thing hanging over my head all the time of like what happens when I drink is dragging me down all the time when I should be happy all the time. Like what the hell? And so then I had this really like kind of traumatizing experience on New Year's, where afterward I was like, okay, now I need to stop drinking for a while. And then I just started thinking like, what would my life be like if I never drank? You know, I'd probably be really happy. You know, almost all the time that I have something that's sticking in my head that's like dragging me down, it has to do with something that happened when I was drunk, you know? So I just decided to stop drinking. And then that was really where I started finally like really getting good real results in tournaments. Like when I got up on the podiums at Europeans and everything, that was after I took a year where I wasn't drinking at all. I didn't have hardly any waves. I just stayed on like a fairly consistent program all year long. I competed like 20 tournaments that year and just didn't lose a crap ton of weight for each tournament. Just kind of competed, like obviously eating well and losing some weight, you know, not just eating however I wanted, but not doing this huge drop down to lightweight. I was competing at like light heavy most of the time, and then I'd cut to middle for the big tournaments. And then I really started like hitting my rhythm, you know, so that made like a whole difference. And I went from like one year I was depressed like the whole year to the next year I had like one of the best years of my life. So, you know, alcohol is like
had to be such a difficult time.
Yeah.
Going through these extremes, and you're talking about emotional and then physical changes, all this is surrounding around this, you know, this partying and alcohol. And I mean, all that, what was going through your mind? And the reason I'm bringing this up is because today, you know, past 3.5 months, we've been isolated. And I know personally, there are so many people struggling with something very similar, maybe not the same, but similar stuff, you know, a depression, you know, anxiety. And I know a lot of them are reaching into, you know, those dark zones where you don't want to be in.
That's
what was going through your mind to get you out of there?
Well, I was lucky that I had traumatizing enough experience that it jolted me out of it to where I was like, okay, I have to take some time where I'm not going to drink, you know? And then I was just basically like, you know, and I just told myself, I'm not going to drink anymore. I'm going to see how long I can go, you know? And then once I made it to 1 year and I was like, had such a good year, you know, and I was so happy and everything. And I was like, whoa, like, cause my mind goes fast. It's something that helps me a lot too, is like, if I start thinking about something, I start going on it, you know, if it's jujitsu or whatever it's going to be, I'm going, but it can also work against me. If I start getting into a dark place, then it just spirals, you know, and I start overthinking and having this, you know, and so not having the alcohol dragging me down really helped me with that. And I had like a year where I was just like really clear-minded, felt really good. And then I was like, I'm not gonna start drinking again. Then after that, it became really easy to not drink again, because drinking became a signal of like that I already had to deal with. And I'm like, I don't want to deal with that ever again. You know, obviously I still have ups and downs like everybody does, but again, it's the same thing with the waves. You know, you may never have that same up as when you're super, super drunk at a festival and you're just, you know, taking your shirt off and acting like a dumbass. You know, you may not ever feel like that again, you know, but whatever happiness you feel is a more real happiness. You know, it's coming from something that's actual, you know, because happiness that comes from a substance is just tricking your brain with chemicals to feel good when you're really doing something stupid.
And you don't have that crash after either, where you feel all that all gets taken away, right? Maybe the next day or a few days later, when you start thinking about what you did and what you thought was so cool at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're like, oh man, did I really stick my foot in it? You know?
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's the waves. It's the huge up. The other side of the wave is the huge down, you know? So if you can keep a more steady wave, then you can just take your baseline and try to make that baseline higher and higher, you know, to where you're just constantly feeling good all the time. You're never feeling that much better than any other time, but you're just always feeling good. And that's where it's good for me, you know, like, and it's not for everybody. Some people can balance alcohol really well. You know, like I know a lot of people that that balance it really well. And I don't judge people that drink at all, but it's just weird that alcohol is the one drug that you get judged for not doing. It's like people are like, you don't drink? I'm like, no, I don't drink. Yeah. They're like, oh, so you're not drinking tonight? I'm like, no, like I don't drink. And like ever, like, no, like ever, like people don't think that that's something that exists, but
that's how we should talk about jiu-jitsu. Honestly, you're not training tonight? What's wrong with you? Everybody else is training. Where are you?
Yeah. But you mean you don't train like ever?
Well, you don't train ever? You've never, what?
What are you doing?
Everybody else does.
Get in here.
Listen, where do you think you would be right now, like realistically, before we finish this hard topic? Where do you think you would be if this one event wouldn't take place and these changes, didn't go the way how they have gone?
I think it eventually, if that one thing hadn't happened, then something else probably would have happened. Like I have a really good like support team and people that believe in me. And I've always had these two kind of sides of myself, it's like the kind of partying side, and I still have two sides of myself. I have like, we all do, like the angel and the devil type side of yourself, but I just have this
like, all devil. So let's get that straight here.
It's true.
Maybe you guys are the angel and the devil for each other. You guys are like
that angel left my shoulder a long time ago.
But I think it's like also having this person that people believe me for being helped a lot, like Claudio and the parents and everybody. They're like, you're this really good role model. And like, I didn't ever feel like I really was that, or I deserved that. Like I would be that on the mat, but I wasn't that all the time off the mat, and then the parents would be like, you're such a good role model for my kid and everything. And then that just made me feel like I have to like live up to that, so if I would have kept drinking, I would still be on the same thing I was before, where I would have times where I was feeling good and times where I was feeling depressed, and hopefully, like, I just felt like eventually something was going to happen that maybe I wouldn't be able to come back from, like get in a fight and hurt someone or get hurt or stumble in front of a car, or I don't know, something. Hope maybe it wouldn't have, and then I would just be in the same thing as always, on these big, waves all the time, like feeling really good and then feeling really shitty, So, but I feel like it was kind of a, we were all on a path. It was kind of something I think maybe was meant to happen,
And I always say things happen for a reason, and we might not see what the reason is, but they guide us through life for us to get somewhere and fulfill the purpose that we have. Okay. There's one more thing that we haven't talked about here. And this is Gary's favorite thing. You're into music, and before we wrap up this whole conversation, talk to us. Where did it start? Where is this coming from? And I've had a privilege to watch few of your pieces, and quite impressive, I have to say.
Thank you, man. Yeah, I started with like I played. My dad was always really into music, so he always had me listening to like Tower of Power and Marvin Gaye and Earth, Wind and Fire and like that type of music. So I was really into that when I was a kid. And then there was the band in the middle school and the high school that I went to, both had really good bands. Like they were like would travel around and they were like well known like in the state. So I started playing saxophone in the band, and then I did that through middle school and through high school. So I had that little bit of a base in music. And then when I was 12, I got into 50 Cent. I think I was into Will Smith, like when I was younger, like his raps and stuff. And like, but I don't consider that like the beginning of my like into hip hop. But that was where that was probably literally the first hip hop that I was ever into. But then 50 Cent was like, I heard In the Club, I think, and I like got super into that song. I was like, whoa, this is amazing. And then I got the CD and I memorized like all the words, and I was like, whoa. And that was when I like became in love with hip hop. And then I just started writing like right then when I was like 12. And then I went backwards. I got into Eminem through 50 Cent, and then Dr. Dre, and then Snoop Dogg, and NWA, and then Tupac and Biggie and Wu-Tang. And then it just went on and on and on, Mortal Technique and Tech Nine. And then, and then hip hop became my main thing. And then we started writing. My cousin was into hip hop ever since. And so we started writing raps together, and he always wrote raps. So he was like super stoked when I got into hip hop, and my cousin Cody. And then we made like a little hip hop group. So we started writing songs, and then we would make CDs and we'd hand them out downtown, and we'd hand them out at school and stuff. And so ever since then we've been doing it. And then I kind of moved away from it a little bit in my 20s, where during that whole time where it was like girlfriend and alcohol and tournaments, and I kind of fell away from it. And then when I started getting back into it, I started being like, oh, I'm going to start posting some of this to social media and see if people like it. And like people were into it, and I was like, I bet if I rap about jiu-jitsu, people will get really into that, and people were liking that a lot. So I'm like, okay, I want to take this a little more serious, So then I made my first album, Kimura Trap Volume 1. You can find that on like Apple Music and Spotify. And then I made the No G and a Gi, because every time I was rapping, people would always be like, oh, G and a Gi, like G and a Gi. And I'm like, no, it's not like G and a Gi. G and a Gi is horrible. So I was like, I'm going to make a video making fun of G and a Gi. So then we did that, and people kind of like that. So yeah, and
that video
now,
is actually pretty good. The production of
like
that video is pretty good, actually. I mean,
yeah, it's probably you're probably the only dude rapping in English Portuguese, throwing Sayanagis in his video, right? When I saw that part, I was just like, this is the guy for me. I love him. I can't wait till we talk to him.
Oh, yeah, that the guy that made the video is one of our black belts, Elio. I was stoked on that, man. Yeah, honestly, we tried a couple different times. I tried a couple different iterations of the song and doing videos with different people, but I really wanted it to be something I was proud of. And when I started doing it with him, it ended up coming out really good. And so we got a couple more planned for that. And then I'm doing a song now that's supposedly going to come out next month, I hope, with a couple rappers from Brazil who are rappers that rap about jiu-jitsu. So Billy MC and MCDD. And they have a couple of songs. We're going to be releasing it on this YouTube, BJJ Emotions. You can check it out. They have like 50,000 subscribers. Billy has a song on there with like 3 million views. So I'm pretty stoked on this one. It's like hopefully going to be the beginning of like it really more and more actually like a lot of people seeing what we're doing and stuff. So I'm pretty excited about that.
So is this leaning towards a professional music avenue for you, or this is more as a hobby? Where's this fit in the grand scheme of things for you?
I mean, it's something like I think of it like kind of like a Kit Dale thing, where like a lot of people know who Kit Dale is, like obviously for his jiu-jitsu, but I first found out about Kit Dale through his like skits, about jiu-jitsu. So he's like an actor, and that makes him more interesting. More people want to have him for seminars, more people want to see him on their fight cards, more people know who he is because of that. So I'm hoping some of that effect will start to happen to where people, when they see me competing, they're like, oh, that's the guy I heard his music, So a little bit of that, and then obviously some monetizing through views on YouTube, merchandise and all that type of stuff. But honestly, like most people are doing that anyway. Like that's how people are making money off of music nowadays, is through merchandise and obviously shows and stuff. But I'm not going to try to make it my whole thing. I just want it to be one arm of me as like a jiu-jitsu influencer that makes me more interesting to people, more content, and obviously, opportunities to monetize as well, but also just because it's really satisfying for me as being one of the things that I'm really into, hip hop, to actually be able to make stuff that people are going to actually be into, and hopefully a large amount of people will end up hearing. It'll be just something that I'll be really happy, and I can have it written on my gravestone when I die.
Not yet.
Not yet, hopefully.
So, am I hearing correctly? Are you going freestyle for us here right now?
I can't believe you're putting him on the spot. Right?
Wow. I think you guys gave me enough.
It was worth a shot.
Anyway this goes. This was Thomas's idea. So when we do meet you and we are on the mat together, this was Thomas's idea. So it sounds like a no, and I don't blame you. I wouldn't put you on the spot like that.
I'd have to have a beat or something. I'd probably come out with more cuss words when I'm freestyling than you guys would be into.
Yeah, like I said, watch what you rhyme with, Gary. So we'll do it next time we talk, right? You'll
definitely,
have it. You'll know who we are. You'll be able to put something together for us.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. You talked a lot about waves. You're a surfer too, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Nice. How does that fit in with, Thomas talked earlier about that lifestyle when you were young, and everybody wanting it, or thinking it's the greatest thing.
Yeah.
And then I see you, catching some nice waves, and you're putting yourself down about it. But I was like, man, come on. That's out here in Illinois. When we talked yesterday, I told you the only surfing you do here is when it's 40 below. The winds are coming off the lake at 60, and those people, you never see those people again.
It sounds to me like you're truly living the jiu-jitsu lifestyle. That's what I'm kind of. Thanks for rubbing in. We have like 55 outside right now. Well, it was like 60.
Wow, no.
There's no waves around here.
No, flat. Everything's flat here.
Yeah, Santa Cruz is we're blessed here to have a lot of really good waves. It's one of the best places to surf in the U.S. And we used to have a WCT event here at Steamer Lane, but they don't come here anymore. But we have, there's a kid from here, Nat Young, who's on the tour and stuff. We've had we're real close to Mavericks. So a lot of the guys that I grew up with surfing Mavericks and stuff. And so that's why I say, like, for growing up here, I should be better at surfing than I am. Like, I'm really not that great at surfing. I give myself like a blue belt, maybe blue belt with like maybe one stripe,
Yeah.
But, I surfed a lot when I was younger. My dad got me into surfing when I was really young. And then I was surfed all the way up until about high school. But the surf culture can be kind of gnarly. It's not like jiu-jitsu where everybody wants there to be more people doing jiu-jitsu. Like, you really don't want more people doing surfing, So when you paddle out to surf, it's not like, oh yeah, right on, there's another guy out here. It's like, this fucking guy, like, what are you doing here? Like, go away, And then if you get in somebody's way, then especially when you're young, like you're a teenager, then you're the Grom, and everybody's like, Grom, beat it, Grom, And I don't know, I was just already doing jiu-jitsu, so I was used to like the vibe at jiu-jitsu, and I was always just enjoyed that more. I'm like, I feel welcome here. I'm kind of like, I can be a shy person too, so I got turned off from surfing by that. Like, I really latched on to jiu-jitsu because it was like the guys that are the best at jiu-jitsu are the nicest guys that are most wanting you to be there with them, And I had like guys like Paul and Mike Weaver, and Weaver was another guy from our team who fought with Jacare, and he was like a really good jiu-jitsu guy too. And they were always like, come with me, let's go train, different places and stuff. So I'm like, I'm going to do this. Cause when you go surf, the guys that are the best at surfing are like, beat it, Grom. What are you doing here? I'm going to beat you up. Like, and so I was just like, stopped surfing for the longest time. And then I got back into it in my mid 20s. I started getting back into surfing again. And then I regretted having stopped, cause I'd be a lot better than I am now if I wouldn't have stopped. But it came back into my life at the right time. So now it's another thing that I really enjoy doing. It's something that doesn't have the pressure of having to be the best at it. It's just like, I'm not that great, but I have fun doing it.
That's like me in jiu-jitsu. I'm not that great, but I have a lot of fun doing it.
How often do you surf?
Right now with the quarantine, I was surfing all the time because we got really lucky. It was like, there had to be something good about 2020. And so we got lucky this year with waves. Like, usually waves can kind of stop sometimes like mid-April, we're already not getting that many waves. Usually by mid-May, it's like really dying down, but we got good waves all the way up through the beginning of June. Now it's starting to slow down a little bit, but we had really good waves this year. In the summer here, a lot of times, like, we'll get a lot of fog in Santa Cruz, but this year has been super nice weather. Like, so I was surfing every day, because I didn't have anything else to do. But when I'm training, I try to get it in the water at least a couple times a week, but it's hard with, lifting and CrossFit and training and having the energy to also surf and stuff. But I definitely try, whenever there's waves, I try to get in the water at least a couple times a week.
So you CrossFit? You do CrossFit as well?
Yeah, I do CrossFit too with Greg Amundsen. He's one of the original CrossFitter guys. Actually, our academy of jiu-jitsu was one of the, I know Greg Glassman just got in a bunch of trouble recently, so I don't know if you guys want to shout out Greg Glassman on your podcast or not, but yeah, he was actually one of the first places that Glassman did CrossFit. He didn't have a place to do it wasn't even called CrossFit at the time, but he didn't have a place to do it. So we had weights and stuff at the front of our academy at Claudio's, and Claudio used to charge him rent to run his little CrossFit thing. So if you look at like the original records from CrossFit, it's like Claudio, Weaver, like a bunch of our black belts are all up on there. They're like the original CrossFitters. And then Claudio's like, man, I should have just asked him for 1% of his business instead of charging him rent. I'd be rich right now. And then it blew up.
The main reason why I asked is because our previous episode, we talked about Rudy Tapala, and he was owner and creator of CrossFit Chicago CrossFit,
oh, wow.
one of the most known CrossFit places here in Chicago. So it kind of all coupled together. So yeah, we had some conversations in regards to that. CrossFit situation recent weeks.
Yeah.
So,
well, I train with Greg Amundsen, and he is one of the original guys too, and he's super cool. Like he's like one of the most. When I had the troubles with competition, and I used to have troubles mentally with competition, and then also when I was going through all those troubles, like he would help me with meditation and mantras and affirmations. He's one of the guys that helped me the most with like my mental game, and he's a purple belt in jiu-jitsu too, so when I go there, he makes sure that what I'm doing is going to be applicable for jiu-jitsu. He doesn't want me to be the best CrossFitter in the world. He helps me to use CrossFit for jiu-jitsu, so it works really good.
How important do you think that cross-training, and that in that sense, meaning not cross-training different gyms or different academies, but cross-training different disciplines, going into CrossFit, running, lifting, swimming, I mean, whatever it might be. How important do you think that is to your jiu-jitsu game?
I mean, there's different like schools of thought on that. I know Marcelo thinks you should only train jiu-jitsu. There's certain guys but I think he's like he's the minority as far as like top competitors go. Almost everyone out there is at least lifting weights, because there's a certain level of strength that you're going to gain by putting heavy weight on a bench press and a squat and a deadlift that you just can't gain no matter how much you do jiu-jitsu, and that myth that strength doesn't matter. It's like, obviously, jiu-jitsu technique makes up for a lot of strength. If you got a guy that has a lot of technique and a guy but not much strength, and the guy that has a lot of strength but no technique, the guy with the technique is going to win every time, but when you're taking guys with everyone's got really good technique, now it's also important to be really strong and explosive as well. So I think that's really, really important, and I think CrossFit works really good, as opposed to like, I think there's a place for running too and stuff that'll increase your overall like gas tank maybe, but it's not, running isn't the same type of stimulus as like jiu-jitsu. It's like we're not doing a long-term thing where you're at the same pace all the time. It's more like CrossFit is that type of mixture of explosion and strength, and explosive movements with trying to recover quickly to explode again, so I think CrossFit gets kind of a bad name within jiu-jitsu because people that start to get into CrossFit start hurting themselves, because really it's hard to do CrossFit every day and jiu-jitsu. They both beat you up a lot. So if you get too into CrossFit, and people have a hard time with like being overly competitive, like I'll go in there and there'll be some like these stumpy little guys like lifting more weight than me and like killing me in the CrossFit workout. And I'm like, I should be the one winning here. I'm like the pro athlete and they're like killing me, and, but it's because they're in there every day. They've got better technique with the weights and everything. So you just got to, be humble and say, I'm not going to compete with anybody. I'm going to use this for what I want to use it for, and then if you use it in a smart way, I think CrossFit's really useful for jiu-jitsu.
What are your plans for any future competitions?
I'm just trying to beg for somebody to put me on a card right now. I've been like hitting up Seth from Fight to Win and the guys from Third Coast Grappling and Jits Kings and all them. I see them putting on these events and I'm just waiting. The last tournament I did, I won the Copa Podio here in California. That was like right before the quarantine. I was getting ready for Pans. They like announced the quarantine like the week before Pans. And, like I was out for a year almost because of my knee surgery. And so I didn't need another year off right now. Like I was not looking forward to taking another year off. I was trying to be hitting it really hard this year, so I'm kind of bummed on that, but I'm just waiting for somebody to open up a spot for me at any tournament and I'll be there right away.
Do you think competition will open up this year?
I mean,
talking about Worlds, Pan Ams. I mean, I know they're all in pause right now, but what's your vision? What's your thought on all this right now?
I honestly think I'll be surprised if they run a Pans or a Worlds this year. I think it'll just be a blank spot in history. I think definitely like Claudio is going to want to run tournaments if it gets to the point where we can. Then like BJJ Tour will definitely be happening. Some of those other events will definitely happen. I feel like if they get to the point where they can, IBJJF will probably set up a couple things, probably, but I don't think we'll see the real big ones. But, the promotions that it can have stuff happening, where they don't have spectators and it's not 3,000 competitors, it's only the super fights they're already having those, so I think before the end of the year, we'll see a few tournaments at least. So I think I got 3 in this year already. So if I can at least hit try to get somewhere close to 6 or 7 or 8, then I'll feel like it wasn't a wasted year at least,
Yeah, hopefully, things will. I mean, you guys are on the West Coast. You're already opening it up. So, I mean, here East Coast is opening up slowly too. We are by far slower, but I'm hoping, optimistic that things
Yeah,
will slowly, step by step, continue opening up.
I hope so.
Nate, what an amazing story. I mean, we've gone through decades of your life and your journey. What an amazing story, with up and downs. I truly think that your story will inspire a lot of people. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your time. How can people find you? There's a lot of things that you do. You're a busy dude. So how can they find you? Where can they find your music? Where can they find your social media? How can we get in touch with you?
So my social media is all the same. It's Nathan Mendelsohn BJJ. So MENDELSOHN. And that's kind of a hard one to remember, but Nathan Mendelsohn BJJ. So it's all together on Instagram, separate on Facebook, separate on YouTube. So one of my main projects that I'm doing now too is getting ready to really take YouTube seriously. So I launched it like last year, and then I kind of put it on pause, but that's where I've been putting my music videos. You can see the No G and a Gi on there. And then in the next month or month and a half at the most, I'm going to start doing consistent content again on YouTube for everybody. So be looking out for that. And thank you very much for having me on, you guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate it. Appreciate it so much.
We'll make sure we stop by your academy when we're in California, and
yes,
obviously if you are in Illinois,
can we stay in the shack?
I don't know
why.
No, there you go. There you go.
All right.
The House of Champions.
If you're in Illinois, swing by. Chicago area. ROL Academy is always open to you. So we will
appreciate you guys.
All right. Thanks, man. Peace.
All right.
All right.
Take care. Thank you for listening to ROL Radio. Check out all future episodes on our website and all major podcast platforms. Take care.